gather gaze and let me tell you tale of liberal Mecca. Way yonder up in the wet, wet northwest, there is a civilization that I can only describe as the most liberal place that must exist in the United States, if not the world. I haven't been to enough of the rest of the world to know how much more liberal it could possibly get than Seattle. It's a place where almost every business has like a sticker on the door that's like, if somebody harasses you for being gay, we'll kill them. Like, the police will be summoned. The amount of raw gayness, like, you can't always tell if someone's gay, but sometimes someone is like signaling that they're gay as hard as they could be, and that's like a sixth of everybody in Seattle. And it's a very dense place. There's people everywhere. There's just a tremendous amount of human movement in this city. And it's people from all over the world. Aside from the gayness, it is the most diverse place I've been. And I've been all over the country. I've been to LA. LA cannot hold a candle to the level of diversity of Seattle. I've not really spent much time in New York City. I've only passed through it, so I can't really speak for if New York is competition. I would imagine that New York is possibly even more diverse than Seattle, but at the same time, New York is closer to Europe. So I would imagine that there is more European tourism there than the whole breadth of Asia that is, visiting from the other side. I found this wonderful and mesmerizing, seeing the gay flags, the trans flags everywhere, the sheer number of trans people. I mean, again, with trans people, a lot of them you can't tell, but there are some people who really try to signal that they are trans, and so, you see plenty of that. When I describe it as a metropolis or a civilization, what I mean by this is that Seattle, the city Seattle, is this hyper-dense little, it's almost like an island, but it's surrounded by other cities, and it's pretty much built all the way down, the edge, the shoreline of Washington for 2 hours worth of driving, until you get to the southernmost part of that, which is Olympia. And Olympia is the most trans place I've been. The place that has the most trans businesses, the most trans people that I've seen in a place. It's a very interesting city. It's also got the most homeless people, but probably the best looking homeless encampments I've seen. Everything in this part of Washington is tremendously nicer than what you will find in Portland, for instance, which is just an hour and a half south of Olympia, I think. Now, my husband, Bird, and I, we worked up here in Washington for a month or two in 2023, and we don't really know people up there except for my friend Marcus, who's lived there for a few years. The couple other people that he introduced us to, the couple times we got to hang out with him while we were there. And from Marcus, I learned that up in Washington, they have a very commonplace phrase, Neurospicy. Now, if you're an internet person, you probably get what this means right away, and maybe you've already heard it. Maybe you already use it. Maybe they even use it in whatever city you come from. Maybe this isn't just a Seattle thing. I've, almost never heard it really used outside of Washington. I think I heard one other person say it somewhere in California, and I was like, oh my God, it's catching on. It's not common parlance throughout the United States. It's certainly not something that they're saying all over Virginia. Even neurodivergent is still kind of very new slang here, where when you go to Seattle, it feels like you're in the future. You feel as though if this culture radiates out from here gradually, this should eventually be what everywhere looks like, and then Seattle will look like something even more, futuristic by comparison to the rest of the United States. Virginia Beach it feels like there are not gay people there. It feels like there are not trans people there. It feels like there is no understanding of any type of psychology, and most of the people who live here are military. They're literally brainwashed. And I'm not like saying that to be mean. It's like they'll tell you, like that's what the military does. They brainwash you. So they are not in a position to be like even considering therapy. I know there's therapy through the military. I know they try to, they don't want people killing themselves, but it happens constantly. I love the word neurospicy because it's got this element of like sexy danger to it, right? Like, ooh, spicy. Ooh, too hot to handle, but also makes everything taste better if you're cool, I guess. Some people don't like spicy stuff, but those people probably wouldn't, I don't know, handle the neurospiciness. Or maybe their neurospiciness is why they don't like spicy foods. Who knows? But there's many different brands of neurospicy, and I like it more than Divergent because Divergent suggests that there is a neutral point from which you are diverting. And I don't think that's true. I think that everybody might as well be considered as a totally unique object, and that there are commonalities between those objects which sometimes someone recognizes and they start marketing towards that commonality. They start saying, "Oh, I've noticed that like broadly a lot of women want to look like this. So I'm going to start marketing to them how they can look like that and create the suggestion in as many other women's minds as possible that this is like a desired thing that like everybody else wants, so you should want it too," and like they create this mass appeal. But it's not an inherent thing. There is no inherent normalcy. Advertisers drew circles around segments of the population, and we created this massive culture, mostly through television over the last 100 years, of this idea of an American identity that just isn't represented anywhere in America. The generic, like, televised version of American society just isn't America at all. And I have seen shows that try to capture maybe a specific, or movies that try to capture a very specific like angle of culture, but oftentimes they're just not equipped to do it correctly. So it's very rare that anything actually feels like that kinetically accurate to what reality is, and in a specific place. Like think of like the Safdie brothers making New York movies. Like that's, well, I can't even say I haven't been to New York. I've just heard from other people that that's what New York really feels like. But what the fuck? I haven't been there. I've never seen something that, that gave the vibe of any place I've actually been. It's romanticized, and sometimes it's easier for me to connect to something like a sound and a place. Like if I'm in California and I'm listening to California music and I'm like appreciating the vibe of how it feels to be there, I can understand like, okay, this captures this emotionally, and if the lyrics are talking about literally the experience of what it's like to live there, it's often pretty fucking spot on, more so than what like, a written dramatization involving characters and fictionalizations can do. Obviously documentaries exist and do a lot to like put you in different places. I feel like I've been to countries I've never been to because of the documentaries I've watched about them. Like there's places I feel like I understand aspects of the culture, even though if you dropped me in there, I'd probably have no idea what's going on, like realistically. But nothing captures the full scope of what it's really like to be somewhere. All of that basically was to say that I don't think there is a normal that you can be divergent from neurologically. I think that when we describe neurodivergence, we're talking about diverting from the cluster you're a part of. But in the US, those clusters are so deeply aberrated, for lack of a better word coming to mind. Like, nobody lives next to their fucking family anymore. It's rare. Maybe in old people communities, like I know octogenarians who live with all of the surviving members of their clan in like at least a square mile of one another. But even then, they're not like next door neighbors. They're driving around, which they shouldn't be doing, to one another's houses. And like outside of super old people, most of us don't know who our immediate neighbors are. Most of the people that we congregate with, we're bringing in from all over the place. And particularly if you live somewhere like Virginia Beach or Hampton Roads, like probably you're in the military, probably like either none of your family is from here or you have to fly back here to see your family. The socialization we're doing is like mostly happening online or through technology. So we don't even necessarily like see face to face a lot of the people that we are communicating with regularly. And even if we do, like maybe we interface with them more through the technology than through actual face to face interactions. So if your clan isn't really like together, then everyone is divergent. And I feel like that's the state of the American family right now. Is like there's a sense of togetherness among families based on memories and nostalgia for the most part, like based on like, well, we've had these experiences that we can all kind of touch back on, and like your own history, the mythology of your family is the main thing keeping like families together at all. The ones that are together, which that's a bleeding concept in today's day and age. I think when we say neurospicy, first of all, it creates this idea that it's not that you're so different that it's a problem. It's that the way that you're different is a problem. Like it's not about, oh, I'm an outsider. It's like, I have a mood disorder. Like I'm going to freak out on you, or I'm going to like crash. I'm going to crash out. Like neurospicy has a light implication of the likelihood of crashing out happening. But it also, there's an implication if you can get used to it. Like if you're somebody who eats spicy food, aka like a rational human being, please don't be one of those people who like never eats spicy food your whole life. Just, you can get used to it. Start with the easy Texas Pete and goddamn get some Taco Bell sauce, gradiate yourself up from the mid to the hot, to the fire, to the Diablo at your own pace. But if any of that is spicy to you, you have the taste buds of a child and you need to work on it. You gotta fix this. You can't go your whole life like this. I fucking implore you. You can build up a tolerance to spice. Everyone has their own unique spice. You're neurospicy in your own way, Some of you got neuro salt. Some of you got neuro pepper. Some of you got neuro paprika. I think I have neuro paprika, actually. That makes the girl in Byakuya is starting to play in my head. That's probably not how that sounds. I had to stop thinking about the girl in Byakuya. I really gotta watch Paprika again. I also like Neurospicy because of its non-specificness, because in all honesty, I think we like really overestimate how much it is possible to specifically diagnose whatever your condition is, because again, everyone's brain is unique. We are just drawing circles around commonalities. We're saying like, well, I've seen someone with something like this before, and this worked for them, maybe it'll work for you. But you always have to customize the treatment to the circumstances. And again, you're only really treating something if it's a problem. There are plenty of people who have, what would be considered neurodivergent or neurospicy or whatever, but actually they just fit in fine. So they're not really neurodivergent. They're not really neurospicy. They just have certain patterns that, I don't know, are the same as people who do have, for whom it is spicy in their circumstances. But like if it's not circumstantially spicy, I mean, it could just be that everyone's used to your taste, like it could be that if you've gotten people used to tasting your spice. I don't know why this is getting sexual. So I got like an eyelash in my eye. So I've been like furiously batting at my eye, trying to get the eyelash out of my eye while I talk. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what is like the terms of mine and other people's neurospiciness. You know, like what is making you like this? What is making me like this? You know, I had therapy for a while. I was diagnosed with ADHD. It was kind of an oddly like non-committal feeling diagnosis. I very much had the feeling like there's more to this. This can't just be because I know people with ADHD and they're not like this, so it can't just be that. And I'm also not that ADHD compared to some of the people I'm thinking of. I am, but I'm much more dissociative. And that was a word I never learned from my therapist who died in a plane crash. He crashed a plane. Although that was years after I was seeing him, so it's not like that affected my treatment or anything. I got really interested in autism and studying autism in particular because a lot of my audience is autistic, and autistic people have a tendency to let you know. Like, they're very upfront because they've been told that it helps, and it does. But also, I can tell. If you're autistic, I'm going to figure that shit out right away. But so much of my audience, like, is diagnosed autistic, and you know, I wanted to communicate with them about that. And so, for a while, I was looking at myself through the lens of like, well, maybe the reason I connect with these people is because of autism. Maybe I'm autistic too. And when I look back at my childhood, I see a lot of commonality to the autistic experience. And we all know autism is a spectrum, so maybe I'm on there somewhere, you know, but like my cousin Evan, who was severely like, and not even to a point that it affected like his, well, it did affect his motor function a bit, but not as much as like, you know, I've seen more crippling autism than what my cousin had, but it was bad. You know, it made it almost impossible to communicate with him. And that wasn't entirely just the autism, it was also his mom's a fucking psychopath. But like, you know, he just never learned how to communicate. And it eventually drove him to the point of setting himself on fire. I've known plenty of people who were as autistic as he was, but nowhere near as tormented or having as difficult of a time because they had better caretakers. They had better educators. They found coping mechanisms. I really hope that if you are listening to this and you're autistic and you feel hopeless, you understand that there are things you can do and people you can find, and it probably won't be easy to do that, but, you know, please don't set yourself on fire. It took him 17 hours to die. I feel like a lot of art and media has been trying to express like the importance of neurodiversity, like not just diversity, but neurodiversity, but like it's difficult to express. I tried to create neurotyping to sort of like categorize once again like different ways that people think. But what I've come to realize since then is that actually people think in such tremendously different ways that even categorizing it that much, like it helps some people, it helped me in certain ways to realize that thinking isn't just like the words you say or the words you say internally. You know, it's not just, thinking doesn't just mean when like a sentence completes in your mind or even just like a fracture of a thought or something repeating. Like there are feelings and thoughts and behaviors that are connected to you physically in ways that like they don't transpire through words, through your mind, you know? You have understandings that go deeper than your ability to formulate words within your own mind. You don't understand everything that you know or that you think enough to talk about it. You just have it in there. You just get it. So neurotyping helped me to understand that, but I don't think that people think even similarly enough for it to be worth trying to like put them into cute little categories and stuff. I really think that it will help you the most to approach everyone on their own terms as their own thing. If you start making assumptions about somebody based on their horoscope, you're narrowing down them into one of 12 categories. MBTI, one of 16 categories. There's 7 fucking billion people on the planet. They don't all fit into 16 categories. And when you start talking to people, bringing in your presuppositions about like those things, you know, again, they're cute thought experiments for getting you to understand that people are different and that that's good, and, you know, like how to cope with it. But if you're thinking about somebody, it's like playing an RPG purely by the rule set, except that the rules aren't actually understood. Like, because the rules of how reality work are just not, like, science hasn't come close enough to understanding the brain to have anything interesting to say about it, aside from like gestures, you know, towards an idea of how it's working. Still feels like magic. Maybe that's why I like psychology so much, is that it doesn't, it's a field of science that is so unpaved, you know, like there's a lot of different angles through it, but, you know, compared to understanding the surface of the planet Earth, we understand much less about the way the fucking human mind works. We may soon know more of the ocean floor than the farthest reaches of the fathoms deep. Part of what I wanted to touch on here is that I'm obviously a very neurospicy person. And I've kind of decided at some point that, like, the only way I'm ever going to have a place in this world is to, like, build up a tolerance to my spice. But it's difficult for me to express what that spice is. How do I explain to you, like, because, again, there's not verbiage for it. I can't just list off a couple of DSM things and then you understand what it's like to be around me, you know, or what it's like to think the way I do or to experience the world the way I do. And I can describe it in literal terms, but when I do that to other people, they usually are just like, well, I've never felt anything like that, so I have no idea what that's like, but it sounds odd or horrifying or however it sounds to them. Fascinating. I think the angle of approach I'm going to take here, because there's a few different ways this video could have gone, and I wanted to call it the Neurospicy Cluster, so that might still be what it's called. But I had at one point considered just calling it like, I'm not quick-witted, or even I'm slow. Like, I feel slow. And I feel like I've always been slow. And that might seem wrong because I talk kind of fast. Well, I shouldn't even say that. I talk in an odd rhythm. It's like certain words have a ton of emphasis, and then there's all these little words slipped in the cracks in between those words. That's also what my thinking is like. It's like fits in spurts and long pauses, and I edit out all the pauses. You know, there's usually, I don't know, an extra few minutes, not a ton, but like places where I just stopped and thought, or took a hit of weed, or took a drink, or like, you know, just really had to meditate on what I'm trying to say for a moment, or remember, you know, where the train of thought was before it spiraled out of control. Just now, that was an example. There was a gap there. Actually, I have to pee, so there's going to be a whole ass edit here. On one level, I've always kind of struggled understanding like what people are saying to me. I usually need people to repeat stuff back to me, and only like literally a year ago did I find out that there's like a sort of a hearing equivalent of dyslexia, where like just words get turned around in your head and you just hear them wrong. And as I've been listening to like a lot of older music that I grew up with, I'm like astonished how wrongly I remember lyrics, because it's slant correct. It's always like a different word that means the same thing, or like, but there's plenty of times where I just fully thought they were saying something completely different from what they were saying. And like, I'll go and read the lyrics and be like, what the fuck? This is what they were saying all this time? And like, it's something that other people have clearly been frustrated in trying to deal with me, but no one had ever articulated it as a problem to me until my husband Bird, because he will hear almost anything going on. He's only really oblivious if he's like focused on something. I am always focused on something inwardly. Like on some level, I am always like hyper fixated on some kind of thought or feeling or whatever I'm going through. I'm really going through it. And so I kind of have a tendency to just block everything out. And in recent years, I've been realizing this is definitely a result of childhood trauma and like the fact that I, as a kid, was so dedicated to the idea that I was a good kid and that my life was good that I think I just like categorically blocked out information that contradicted that. Like if my parents are fighting and if like, I'm just not feeling good about life, I just blocked it all out. And I was in such a state of dissociation and like attempting to block everything, like everything that scared me, everything I didn't understand, school in general. Like for me, I had moved so many times before I even started elementary school that the only thing consistent to me was my mom's presence. I was always with my mom. So when I started school and I wasn't around her anymore, I felt like, well, who do I ask what to do? Like, how do I do anything? How do I know where to go? And I never, like, lost that feeling. Even as I went through the motions of doing school, I always did the bare minimum of what was told to me. Nothing extra. But when you're in elementary school, there is a lot more oversight of people making decisions about what you should do. By the time I was in high school, I had still never developed the skills of like, figuring out my own shit for myself. I was just like letting it happen and hoping it would stop. I wanted it to stop the whole time. All of school was just me being like, God, I wish this was over. I wish this was over. When is this going to be over? But initially, I wasn't bad at it. And that's because I had learned a lot of the basic stuff that they teach you in the first years of school through Sesame Street, through being at home in front of a TV and learning devices like the Sega Pico for, a lot of my time as a kid, and also watching sing-along music videos. So I was used to seeing words, and trying to read them. So I'd learned to read and write on a very basic level, like before I even started kindergarten, which was mostly trying to teach you how to do those same things, So for the first few years, because I was ahead of the class, I was treated like I was this exceptionally smart student. But outside of those very basic skills, kindergarten skills, I had nothing else a child my age is supposed to have. I had no sense of how to participate in a community, in a group setting, how to make any type of friends, how to play with other kids, And there are levels on which I figured that kind of stuff out, but I kept moving, the family kept shifting gears. And if you have to completely reestablish familiarity with yourself everywhere you go, and like, as a kid, people they have no reason to care about you. They're not going to give you any they're not going to give you any grace, They're not going to give you patience. They're going to be pretty ruthless about what they think about you when you introduce yourself and open your mouth. And so, I just only ever had a couple of friends each place that I lived. I'm glad I at least had something going on, and I loved my family. And I eventually turned my little brother Victor into like a little mini-me clone that basically, in the absence of having my mom around, I had my brother around. And so I had to turn him into as much of me as I could, myself being built out of the image of whatever my mom had been doing with me for the first 4 years, first 5 years before my brother Shade was born. And after that point, she's now a mother of 3. My mom basically, she had a really rough time for the first few years of having 3 kids. she was pretty depressed and she became pretty distant. So that's the period where it really became like, okay, mom's not around for me anymore. It's just me, my brother Victor, and we're making it through, But like, I never left the house. Like, I didn't stray far. I just was a very frightful child. So I always had this weird kind of duality where, like, kids my age treated me like I was slow. They treated me like I was different and, like, kind of incomprehensible. And all that's pretty fair, because if somebody asks me a question, A, I probably need them to repeat it, and B, I will sit and think before I answer, because I have a tendency to consider every variable of what could be said, as opposed to just simply, like, I don't have that kind of confidence in most scenarios that I immediately know what my answer would be without thinking about it. Like, I've gotten way, 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 way quicker about decision making over the years, and podcasting helps with that a lot, because you're constantly having to decide what the next word is going to be, or what the next statement or sentiment or whatever. I don't have to plan every word, but you have to keep the gears turning, basically. I guess what I'm trying to say is that because of the fact that as a kid, I identified so much as being smart, I kind of thought everybody around me must be, like, dumb. Like, well, why can't everybody else get good grades? Why do they all have these bad opinions? Why does everybody, like stuff I don't like? Why doesn't anybody like the stuff I like? Why do I have such a hard time getting anybody to... I really wanted people to treat me the way my mom treated me, which was to be exceedingly patient. And it's not even that I think my mom is sincerely patient. It's more that she felt incredibly responsible to her children. Like, the best thing I can say about my parents, they were very, very adamant about trying to raise their kids to adulthood to the best of their ability. Like, that's what kept their marriage together. It's what kept them sane. barely clinging to threads of sanity. I can't even say they were wholly sane. They both went totally insane through various periods. But, like, we came out all right, I guess. Through all of that, I had to maintain this self-identity of, like, an intelligent person. And that became harder for me as I realized that school doesn't come naturally to me. Like, I dissociate, I stop paying attention, I go completely into my own world. I struggle to bring myself to do things I don't want to do. And, like, aside from the fact that I just felt miserable in school and I felt like it was never really reaching me, when I got to third grade, I was put into a special gifted school. And in third grade, I already started slipping a little bit into, like, the C range grades. And my mom was pretty harsh about it, So that was when I really started, like, hating school, hating life, being like, this, I don't want to do this anymore, First tried to, like, kill myself in this time period. And then in fourth grade, my teacher was just, like, a harrowing cunt, and she got fired, like, after this year because so many kids left her class. The difficulty was insane. She was basically giving us, like, college work in the fourth grade. It was nuts. Like, in retrospect, I could tell this was above the level of work I would be doing in high school. Granted, I went to, like, regular normal ass public high school, but still. I left the gifted school, I was somewhat disillusioned to the idea that I was a great student. But there was still, like, carrot on the stick motivation. My parents would give us, like, $10 if we made an A, $5 if we made a B. So I was still kind of, like, trying to keep up my grades. But as, like, middle school wore on and high school wore on, I really just got beaten down about the school experience. Like, I hated being there so much that I would get more and more distant. My grades started falling. At the end of my junior year of high school, my grade point average was a 1.9, which I don't even think you could graduate with. I got it up to like a 2.1 by the end of, or 2.3 or something like that by the end of senior year, so that I could, graduate. And I did graduate. But I wanted to drop out the whole fucking time. Like, I spent all of 10th and 11th grade in particular, like, just ideating dropping out. In 11th grade, I really had given up. I fucking didn't care at all. I slept through all of Algebra 2, ended up retaking it, doing fine the next year. Almost got like kicked out of school because of this miserable experience I had with an advanced English class. And that was another case where like I felt like I cared about the class and connected to the material in a way, but it was just too much work for me to process. Like, the class moved very quickly, and it would always be kind of on to the next thing. And I was like too shy to ask questions. And, maybe I would have, if I was a different type of a person, had a better time in this class. But just like, I just felt fucking slow. I felt like I can't keep up with this. And, people would tell me, but even back then, that my writing was very strong, that I had a strong writing voice, that I would probably be able to be a good writer one day. Like, literally, even in high school, I was being told like my writing is above average. But that's it, like nothing else about my grades was above average. Why I ended up making this video, I finally remembered it sparked the inspiration of this. I knew I was forgetting something. Someone left some comments in Japanese on one of my videos. Let's see how well I can try to actually read these comments, like, in Japanese, because I Google translated them to be able to respond to them, because it's kind of mocking. All right, I believe this says, Nihongo no kanji I can't read, o kanji I can't read, shita ga runara, doshite Nihongo something shite inai no ka. The gist of this is that he's saying, why are you saying the names Japanese style if the video is in English? You should just learn Japanese and do it in Japanese, or, just do everything in English. Otherwise, you sound like a Japanophile. I said, I think it feels weird not to call things that are Japanese in the Japanese style. Take it however you like. Obviously, I'm a Japanophile since I'm an English speaker making videos about anime. This is on my Cardcaptor Sakura anime alphabet video, by the way. They responded, basically, you should learn Japanese. And I said, well, I took 3 years of Japanese class in high school. I have some comprehension for listening to it. I just can't read most kanji. I'd put more into it if I thought I was going to move there anytime soon. But I spend a lot of my time traveling the U.S. and indulging its culture more than Japanese stuff. They said something to the effect of, like, how could you read that kanji if you don't read Japanese? And I said, Google Translate. And it looks like they responded with something that I haven't translated yet, so let's go ahead and do that. They responded with, you are inconsiderate. Well, I think it's kind of inconsiderate to, like, put me on blast randomly about the way I chose to say the fucking names in the anime video, but whatever. It's also inconsiderate to write in a language you know I can't read when you obviously know English. So, anyway, this comment got me thinking, like, how do I express to people that, like, I'm not, like, capable of just fucking stuffing Japanese lessons into my life like that. Like, it's not, I barely passed high school, I dropped out of community college, and the specific reason I dropped out of community college, so I started in a communications major, and it was purely out of the fact that it was the only major that did not require me to take any core classes. I really just didn't want to I didn't want to feel like I was in school anymore. I was desperate to feel like I was not in school, but I didn't want to go into the workforce either. So I went to community college on my dad's dime, and I took a few classes. I was actually going with my mom. My mom decided to go to college along with me. So the two of us because I didn't have a driver's license yet, and I was still afraid to drive. I was so fucking physically dissociated back then. Like, I really didn't know how to place myself in the world. You know, I just took, like, some classes, some of them with my mom. We both had a photography class in the first semester. I did some design classes, and some of them were kind of fun, and I learned some stuff. I did, like, middling in them. And then I ended up switching over to business classes because my dad had given a rousing speech where he was trying to convince us that we should learn business so we could open a family business together. But the business classes were online, and I did not have the work ethic for that. So after like 2 weeks, I had stopped doing the work, and I couldn't admit this to my parents until the point I had already failed the course. Like, I was definitely going to fail. And that was when I finally sought medical help. Like, that was when I wrote them a letter. I rode my bike down to the hospital. I told them told my parents I would have them put me on suicide watch. I did not end up having the courage to do that. So I just waited, and then they came and got me, and then I got therapy. Yada, yada, yada. Therapist dies in an airplane. You get it. So I then went back to school because my therapist advised me, well, you know, you should probably go and try to get an English degree because you love writing. This is not good advice, actually. Like, an English degree is fucking worthless. I think he just was really trying to look for an easy answer for me. And so I did start going back to college and start pursuing an English degree. And I had a great experience in my English 101 class just because my teacher gave me some good writing advice. But then, you know, I started doing core classes, and eventually I got to a psychology class, and I really enjoyed this class in terms of, like, the lectures, the knowledge, what was going on. But I hated the homework, and I would not read the textbook, and, like, all the tests were based on that. So I got a D in this psychology class, and I found out that's a non-transferable grade. I would have had to retake it if I went to university, which was supposed to be the plan, like to transfer to a 4-year college at some point. When I realized that I couldn't even pass a class I genuinely enjoyed, I stopped trying. I was just like, nope, college, this is it. College is over. Like, this is not the thing. Around then is when I took my trip to the Philippines, and that opened up my worldview a lot, but not in a way that helped me when I got back home, because things are just too different over there. Like, it just kind of made me get reverse culture shock for America, which was strange. And I ended up being a NEET for like a year and a half. When I had a job at Target, I felt slow. I felt like I was always pushing myself to the maximum just to keep up with doing the work, because my mind was always going, and I wanted to be able to think about other things. Like, I wanted to be able to dissociate and think about, you know, whatever video I was going to write when I got home, just like I had done through school. But I couldn't do both things at once. I could not keep up with the work and think about other shit. So I just kind of would grind away, you know, and then I'd come home and I'd dispense all the, you know, all the feelings into posts or whatever. But I would just be so fucking burned out. Like, it was just too much for me. Most of my life and most of the time, I have been quiet. Unless I was talking to my brother Victor, or one of my old friends from high school who I had gotten close enough with that, you know, they knew that I was a ranter, you know, somebody who would go on and on and on. But those people also all knew me as a quiet, dissociated, you know, unresponsive, somebody who would just walk out of the room all the time, you know, like, I'd just leave the room that everyone's hanging out in and go do something else. Like, everybody knew that about me. The internet didn't know that about me. The internet can't know that about me, because if I'm not there, I'm not fucking there. But consider this. Consider the possibility that as much of my voice as you hear is the majority of my voice that gets used. That I don't talk to that many people or for that much of the day. I talk to Bird. Bird enjoys conversation, but Bird is witty. Bird is quick. Bird is quippy. Bird likes to have, like flirty Joss Whedon dialogues with people everywhere he goes. When we turn up somewhere, Bird almost certainly will start up a conversation that will make that person's day, whoever he's talking to. And I will kinda watch. I just kinda am there. I might chime in. Depends on how much the person really addresses me. I like answering questions. I like prompts. I like when I get an idea and I'm like, ooh, I think I could talk about that for half an hour. If I don't think I can talk about it for half an hour, it's fucking gone. It's, out of my brain. Or it's like a tweet, or it's a song lyric or something. But like, the vast majority of words that go through my head are fucking nonsense. The vast majority of words that come out of my mouth are also nonsense. Like, the internet doesn't even know my catchphrase. Someone does. Trixie Clipsy knows my catchphrase. And if you go to Trixie Clipsy's channel, you can probably figure out what my catchphrase is. But I say that word, now I'm not going to spoil it because I want you to go on this adventure. I say that word more than any other word. I was going to say in the English language, but that word's not in the English language. It's a word I made up. I say words that I have made up, not just that one. I say words that I've made up way more than real words. And that's always been true. The words change, but if you asked anybody who knows me, they'll be like, yeah, most of the time B just like says nonsense, like makes noises, uses a baby voice for like, a substantial amount of communication, and otherwise is quiet or like staring into space. I will literally stare into space for 10 minutes at a time in front of somebody, like standing in front of somebody, like not at them, not staring at them, just like staring in a little off to the side, I guess. So like when I say that I'm slow, I don't mean that like I'm stupid, but I do mean that I have real difficulty concentrating on what people are saying to me. I have a hard time learning things through words or through being told, really hard time remembering instructions. If you try to give me like step-by-step instructions of something, we're going to have to run back through it a couple times. You got to give me like a list or something. If I have it written down, it's different. When it comes to reading comprehension, 10 out of 10. When it comes to ability to formulate a sentence, 10 out of 10. But that's not the same thing as knowing what to say. Once I know what to say, I can say it beautifully. That requires knowing what to say. This podcast has been the culmination of weeks of thought about these subjects. I could have made a video called, like, I think I'm slow, like a year ago. I could have made a video called Neurospicy a year ago, but I didn't know what to say. I knew I wanted to say something, but these thoughts, they come back through my brain, and they come back through my brain, and I think about it a little more, and I think about it a little more, and at some point I go, I bet if I turn on a microphone right now, by the end of, usually I underestimate, so I'm usually thinking like by the end of 20 minutes, I'll have made this point, and I won't have to keep thinking about this all the time, or I'll think about it even more, and I'll have another video on my hands. In this case, I think I've reached the end of what I'm trying to say. The slow thing, like, it really sinks in for me when I'm around Bird's family, because they're all incredibly quick-witted people, and so it's a lot of banter. There's a lot of like funny stuff flying all around my head, and I literally will like be so busy trying to explain inwardly to myself what they're saying, like, oh, that's funny because it's a reference to this, or like, oh, that's okay, that's wordplay. Like, I have to explain it to myself to get it, and because of that, I don't have a response, or I do, but I think of a response 5 minutes late, And then I hold on to it for 5 minutes because that would have been so good, but I don't know how to, there's no way to interject it now. The moment's gone, so like, I just feel like I'm almost like watching a movie of other people living life because I'm too slow to participate in the movie. Like it's moving too quickly for me to get my line in. And that's why I like doing completely independent media, because I don't have to compete to get my line in. And the only times I've ever really been able to do like cooperative stuff is with people who are like similar in how they communicate to I am, with like a lot of aggression. And like I've come to realize, like talking to my mom lately, that if you don't force your way into the conversation, you won't get to speak. Like she doesn't stop. Like she'll finish what she's saying, and if you don't start saying something right away, then she'll just keep going because she doesn't think you have something to say. And like I'll think maybe 700 thoughts that I never get to say, and most of them I'm like, well, I could interject here, but it's just going to make this interaction longer. And like she's not a very charitable listener either, so like you're going to splinter this conversation off into an endless tangent if you try to interject. So I usually try not to, but because that's the energy I'm used to, it's hard for me to like have a conversation with somebody if there's not an expectation that both of us can just like cut each other off because we're both trying to get our thoughts all out. This has caused problems with me and Bird. He's actually not like that at all. He does not like to be interrupted, and granted, I've had to point out to him that, yeah, but you do it all the time, and he's become apologetic about it. But we both have been trying to not interrupt one another, because it bothers both of us. But like, when in the context of like regular everyday conversation and not a podcast. But like if I'm going to do a show, I want somebody who's like as aggressive of a communicator as me, because otherwise either I'm not going to say anything or they're not going to say anything, because most of the time I don't say anything. And so if I'm in a context where like my job for once is to say everything on my mind, I really don't want to leave anything on the cutting room floor, because it's like, this is my shot, and I always feel like there's a sense of desperation on my end in a conversation where other people don't feel there's not as much weight on every conversation because they have more of them. Like having conversations is more normal. To me, it's like they're so rare that I'm going to remember all of them, So there's a very nerve-wracking aspect to it. It's like, I know I'm going to re-examine everything I said and everything they said over and over in my head until I've interpreted every meaning I can out of it, even unhealthily, And so there's also like kind of, I don't want to contribute too much to making that potentially worse for myself. Like if I make the conversation go long enough that I end up saying something embarrassing, then like, that will be regrettable. Or if I try to steer it in a direction and it doesn't go that way, and it's disappointing. Honestly, I feel like I experience constant time dilation. Like how long each second feels compared to the last is always different. And so when I say that I feel slow, like when I listen back to my recordings, they're always faster than they felt. Like I'm always talking faster. The gaps aren't as long as they felt in the moment. But I think it is just because I know that in a context where it's not just me and I'm not going to edit all that, like that's the moment where I never got to speak again. Like that 10-second gap where I stopped to think about what I was going to say next is where the conversation blew past me, if it's more than just me and another person. So there is a preciousness to me with all the content I make, because it does, represent like days of thought sometimes. And it's not that I expect someone to be like interested in what I have to say as much as that I'm hopeful they will be, because otherwise it feels like I expended all this effort of thought onto something that nobody cares about, you know? And it's like it makes me feel like I'm talking to myself. Like I've spent an enormous amount of time talking to myself, which I have. But if I can turn that into a conversation with other people, then it becomes more satisfying, you know? And especially if it's like I've gathered up this kind of conversation bomb that I can drop on you, and you get all these thoughts at once, and then you can kind of pick and choose what you want to respond to and where the conversation goes from there, you know? But at least I got to say everything, at least, you know, because I know there's not another conversation. All right. Hopefully this incredibly long clusterfuck of a podcast felt like it made sense. It made a point. I'm Trixie the Golden Witch. Find all my stuff in the description. Vote for me for president in 2028. The first openly neurospicy, openly trans, openly pansexual president of the United States. First 36-year-old, youngest president. First female president. Trixie the Golden Witch. All right, Trixie forever.